IPL advertising has become a genre of its own. From way back in 2008 when the tournament began and we'd see these adorably funny Zuzu ads by Vodafone.
Or like this one by Sony Max that used to stream the tournament on television way before OTT came into the picture.
अब सावित्री व्रत रखेगी साइमंड्स के लिए। रजिया चराग रोशन करेगी सहवाग के लिए।
To now, like this cred ad featuring Rahul Dravid that went viral on social media.
It's like saying Rahul Dravid has anger issues.
Hey! That doesn't mean you can overtake. Come, man, come.
Could have gone straight and taken it.
इंदिरानगर का गूंडा हूं मैं.
Or this one by Dream 11.
भैया किधर? पास में यार. आपकी टीम बस उधर है.
जब इंडियन T20 लीग आता है ना, तो हवा बदल जाती है.
Over the years, ever since IPL began, brands have been spending the big bucks to make ads specifically for the tournament. You've surely seen some of these ads over the years. And while we know that it is not so easy to tell on audio, but here's the thing that we're trying to say. If you pay close attention, you will realize that the nature of these ads have changed ever since OTT came into the IPL picture.
Because OTTs offer brands things that TV couldn't. The chance to reach out to a more targeted audience. It's a more personalized experience. Plus, there's more flexibility and the outcomes are also way easier to measure.
For example, this year alone, JioHotstar is expecting to make 3,000 crore rupees in ad revenue from IPL.
And it makes sense. There is no other event in the country that garners the kind of eyeballs that IPL does. Last year, it reached nearly 7 million viewers on OTT alone. So, for brands, it's a once-in-a-year opportunity.
Take Hindustan Unilever or HUL for example. The FMCG giant is one of the biggest advertisers in the country and it spends nearly 4,000 crore rupees every year on ads. And out of that, this year, 100 crores at least is just for IPL.
It's the same for other brands, both big and small. All of them reserve a pretty big chunk of their annual ad budget just for IPL.
So, you understand how BCCI or the Board of Cricket Control of India and all these brands that advertise and the OTT platform, which is JioHotstar right now, all work together for this monster money-making event to be a success.
But recently, a fundamental flaw in this well-oiled machinery has caught the attention of both advertisers and JioHotstar. It all started with HUL receiving a bunch of consumer complaints.
About what? We will give you a hint.
It has something to do with the number of times you see an ad on an OTT platform.
Welcome to another special episode of Daybreak. I'm Snigdha.
And I'm Rahil.
And once a week, Rahil and I come together to talk about things in business and tech that interest the both of us.
And it won't just be us. Depending on what we're talking about, we will also be bringing a bunch of really interesting people on the podcast.
In this week's episode, we were joined by our colleague, the Ken reporter Ronak Kumar Kunjan. So, Ronak, I know that IPL is like this insane time for advertisers, right? Like just because of the sheer number of impressions that they get, and the kind of viewership that it has. So, I wanted to understand, like, is there some kind of a war that breaks out between brands, before IPL, to buy ad slots? Like, are there like a limited number of ad slots and there are too many brands fighting for space?
Not exactly. So what happens is these OTT platforms, Hotstar in this case, they come up with their ad rates, and those ad rates are floated across advertisers like PNG, HUL, Swiggy, Cred, etc. So basically, what these OTT platforms do is that they promise a certain number of impressions. So
Hmm.
as long as they're hitting those impressions, the companies are absolutely fine with it. So it's not really a war sort of that happens, but yes,
Hmm.
surely advertisers plan way in advance before IPL, months in advance.
As we said a little while earlier, digital platforms fundamentally changed advertising. Back in the day when it was just TV and print ads, things were simpler but also inefficient. These ads were seen by everyone, and advertisers couldn't really choose their audiences. But with digital, there was so much scope for customization. Suddenly, advertisers were able to reach out to specific demographics and to understand who actually ends up watching their ads. And when an event like IPL went digital, advertisers, for obvious reasons, went crazy. Being seen during IPL could change a brand's trajectory.
Okay, so Ronak, what kind of money are we talking about here? I mean, how much are these companies, big and small, willing to pay for an ad slot on an OTT platform during IPL?
So HUL this year is planning to spend about rupees 100 crores, is what one of the sources told me. For a slightly smaller player, because HUL is one of the largest Indian advertisers out there, so they spending 100 crores is still understandable. But for a startup like say Swiggy or say a Cred, anywhere between 30 to 40 crores is spent specifically on trying to advertise their products during IPL.
Okay, but how much of their total ad budget actually goes towards this one event, the IPL specifically, if we were looking at it just in percentage terms?
It varies from every year. For instance, when Swiggy was very, very active with IPL ads, it was spending at about 20, 25 to 30% of its annual ad budget only for IPL. They don't give out these numbers, so these numbers are source based. And for somebody like Cred, because they went all out with their marketing, with their ads, the kind of people they hired for their ads, etc. So their marketing spends in terms of ads were already high. But even then, specifically for IPL, they were spending about 25% of their entire ad budget, one fourth of it.
Right. So, Ronak, the ROI for these advertisers is huge, right? During the IPL, let's take Tata Motors, for example. They had the title sponsorship for last year's event. And I was reading newspaper reports, and they seemed really happy with the results. So, can we talk about this a little bit?
So I spoke to somebody who was part of Tata Motors when this IPL title sponsorship was happening, and he
Hmm.
said that it's almost a 4x return, and not in terms of
Wow.
money, but in terms of say user engagement, in terms of say inquiries, in terms of the attention that the kind of product that they're advertising it gets. So and they said there is no other event, live sports event or otherwise in India that gets the kind of attention that IPL does. Almost 7 million people watching it on their OTT platforms, similar numbers going to stadiums, etc. So obviously it's a high stakes event, and it almost always works very well for advertisers as well, which is why the kind of preparation that goes about.
So, year after year, a large chunk of the overall ad budget for some of India's biggest brands is invariably earmarked for the IPL. But this year, the run up to the IPL has not been smooth sailing. You see, there has been a growing tension between these advertisers and the OTT platform, which is JioHotstar in this case.
It all began in the corporate office of Hindustan Unilever, one of India's largest FMCG companies. For context, this is the company that owns popular household staples like Surf Excel detergent, Brook Bond Red Label tea, and Lifebuoy soap. Like we mentioned a little while ago, it also happens to be the country's top advertiser across genres.
In November 2024, HUL started receiving a barrage of complaints from its customers.
Some of the users came up with complaints like they're seeing the same kind of ad over 150, 200 times in a week, which can be annoying for users. And that's when HUL took notice of it and they wanted to find out what's wrong.
With the IPL right around the corner, HUL could not afford to ignore these complaints. So, what followed was a series of investigations. And what HUL ended up discovering has opened a real can of worms for not just JioHotstar, but OTT platforms in general.
So, what they basically found through their third party apps, through their ad tech partners, etc., is that frequency, as we said, was being optimized for and not reach. So a smaller group of users were being shown the same ad multiple number of times in order for the required number of impressions to be hit. And that's when they realized that also one of the reasons why they're not able to reach out to as many people as they wanted to in the first place.
We are going to pause right here to give you a quick lowdown on how this works. You can think of it sort of like digital advertising 101. So, every time an advertiser and an OTT platform sign an ad contract, the platform promises a targeted impression count.
Basically, an ad impression is nothing but a multiplication of two factors. One is the frequency of it, and the other is reach. Frequency is the number of times an ad is shown to one user, and reach is the number of users that ad is shown to. So basically, frequency multiplied by reach is the number of impressions for that ad. So, for instance, HUL would want a certain ad to have, say, a million impressions. But along with impressions, there is also a time frame to it. That, for instance, there will be 5 days by which the ad should reach a million impressions. Otherwise, there's no point to it, right? It cannot take 6 months for a million impressions. It'll serve no purpose.
Now, pretty much every marketer out there believes that the frequency of an ad should not be more than 3 because the incremental value required to show the ad for the fourth, fifth, or sixth time to the same user does not justify the cost involved with it. But what irked advertisers like Hindustan Unilever was that platforms like Hotstar were not following the rule of threes. Instead, they were very often spamming viewers with the same ad.
So that's what they found out, that instead of reach, frequency is being optimized for by these OTT platforms. And further into the investigation, they realized that for a lot of these marketers, they don't even know that the problem is frequency, and it is not the fact that impressions are being hit, etc. Because basically, the biggest problem with OTT and web platforms is how they define a user, a unique user. So because these apps and these web platforms do not talk between each other, they assume that the same person who's moving from a web to an app platform are two different unique users. So basically, the same number of ads are being shown again to the user when he's moving from a web platform to, say, an app platform.
Right. But Ronak, this seems like a very technical issue, right? So, is it fair to blame the OTT platform entirely for it, or like whose responsibility is it ultimately?
It is the responsibility of the OTT platform. But the problem is that, for instance, TV ads took about 20-25 years to be where they are. OTT for now hasn't got that kind of a time to mature. It really took off post the pandemic, and then there was IPL, there were advertisers, there was so much money involved. So almost everybody that I spoke to for the story, who were from the advertisers side, they did have an empathetic side for the OTTs. They said it's not that what they've been doing is absolutely amazing. They should be very, very careful about it. But we should be giving them some more time before we, sort of hold them completely responsible for it.
Right, but that kind of begs a pretty fundamental question, right? Why not just fix it? So, if platforms are currently optimizing for frequency over reach, why not just change your tech stack to be able to do the opposite, right? Why is that so hard for OTT platforms?
So the biggest problem is that when an OTT platform promises a certain reach, say they promise a reach of a million a day, that's a very variable metric, right? And which cannot be controlled by the OTT platform. No OTT platform can absolutely, with complete conviction, predict that there will be 1 million users on my platform tomorrow. Of course, there can be averages from what they found out in the past, which is why the tweaking of reach and frequency begins. And you're right, there is a tech stack problem as well, where the tech stack works in the favor of OTTs and not advertisers, and they look at device IDs a certain way. So, that's what the advertisers said. These are problems that we identify, but it'll take some time to completely sort out all of these issues.
There is no quick fix. That's what senior HUL executives learned after several meetings with JioHotstar officials. HUL told the Ken that it invests in ad tech on every campaign to avoid the problem of overexposure. It also engages a bunch of other tools to track the frequency across OTT platforms. And if an OTT platform fails to meet its reach and frequency requirements, it pauses advertising with the platform. But with the IPL coming up, it isn't quite as straightforward a decision for any advertiser.
So, Ronak, in a situation like this, will a company like Hindustan Unilever in this case, will they pause their partnership with JioHotstar, or will they kind of cut down their ad budget for the IPL? I want to understand what are the consequences of something like this.
So Snigdha, they can't really cut down on their advertising budget because IPL, as we spoke, is the biggest event. They cannot, sort of afford to go slow there or go curbed or controlled there. They will be spending as much as they plan to spend.
So, just this month, JioHotstar announced that it was partnering with the global media audience measurement firm Nielsen to introduce third party verified ad data starting with the upcoming IPL. The aim, simply put, was to amp up transparency in digital ad measurement. Because think about it, it's in everyone's best interest to arrive at a compromise in the situation. All of them need each other. But ultimately, it also boils down to who is more dependent on whom.
But had there been no Nielsen, even if Hotstar would have said that nothing doing, we will continue working as we
Yeah.
were, H2L
Yeah.
still wouldn't have been able to sort of bring down their ad expenditure or their ad efforts during the IPL because basically because of the kind of eyeball it attracts.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of the Ken, India's first subscriber focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber only offerings.
A full subscription unlocks daily long form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website.
Today's episode was hosted and produced by Rahel Philippos and I, Snigdha Sharma, and it was edited by Rajiv CN.